A full moon silhouetting rugged cliffs against a clear night sky. Emma Armbrust could read right now if she had a book. She is riding her 17-hand horse Tower, a thoroughbred, with man of war breeding on both sides. Emma Armbrust is 18 years old, the horse 10 years old, which in human years makes Tower 40. Emma often thinks about this and marvels at how Tower doesn't feel that old. Tower rotates one ear back in her direction, and she smiles. She knows what he is thinking. She has projected an image of a very old sway-backed horse, and he picked it up. This is the premise of this book, Talking with Horses. Horses know what we think. You can approach a horse and you can be 50 yards away and they look at you. You keep walking in their direction and they're picking up your energy, and by the time you get there, they know what mood you're in, how you feel, what your intentions are, whether you're in a hurry or you're going casual. They've read you like a book, just like I read this book. And they will respond accordingly. They've been around 50 million years, we've been around 5 million years. One reason they've lasted so long is they've been able to think out every other animal on the planet. They don't have teeth to rip into flesh. So their defense was speed. They can outrun anything on the planet except maybe a jaguar. And eventually they'll outrun the jaguar too, because they got the distance. The jaguar doesn't have the distance, he has speed. So I got to thinking about all of this while my dear wife Linda was dying of dementia. I sat by her bed for 4 years, held her hand and told her I loved her many times every day, and tried to coax life into her while watching death work its magic and steady hand a little bit more every day. Dementia takes a long time to claim death, but it will. We have no cure for it. But while I was nursing her, I'm thinking about this, and I'm thinking I've started to study the human brain. Read books on brains, and so happens that our brain is an extraordinary piece of equipment. It doesn't actually run the body, the gut runs the body, but it is like a traffic cop. It directs things, fires things, puts things in order. So you need an orderly brain. Dementia takes that order away, because the brain runs on electricity like our entire body runs on electricity, and dementia happens when wires in the brain get short-circuited. They don't fire as they should, and the forces become tangled, so the brain doesn't function as it should, except for very primitive actions. I got to thinking about that, and I thought, wow, that's pretty interesting that the brain of somebody in dementia, it's the primary cerebral function is from the primal brain, which is the oldest brain we have. It's at the base of our skull, and that's the brain that's kept us alive for all of our 5 or 6 million years. If somebody comes up behind you and lets off a gun behind you, you drop to the ground. You don't think about, I got to fall on the ground because somebody's firing a gun. You'll drop there and you realize you're on the ground. Your your reptilian brain took that over. That's the oldest brain. So you went down to protect yourself. You didn't have to think about that. So I studied this and I thought, well, this is Linda is using only her primal brain, the very first brain that we ever had. Well, it so happens that brain is very similar to the brain of a horse. And then it occurred to me that, wow, if we could get on the same brain length as the horse, then we can communicate with the horse. And I had started doing this when I was very young, communicating with horses, because I couldn't communicate with people. I had a very bad speech impediment. And after I fixed that, after a horse fixed it by talking to the horse, um, which is where the title of this book came, Talking with Horses. That's how I learned to speak, talking with a horse. I couldn't talk to people, but I found I could talk to horses, which is very interesting in that there was no anxiety with me addressing the horse. I felt at least on the same plane, maybe in my um, inner self a little bit superior, because I could think and I could reason, and horses think, but they have no deductive powers. They can't put all of these things together and come to a solution. It's not how they work. It's very primal. So I thought, well, I should write a book about that. So I started writing a book exploring the idea that this brain, this primal brain, this very early brain that we have, is similar and can get on the same wavelength as a horse brain. So therefore we should be able to communicate with a horse. Well, so happens in our society, people with autism are using the primal brain more than the frontal lobe. The frontal lobe is what we use for communication, what I'm using now, talking to you. Uh, that's that's our main functioning brain, is the frontal lobe. And there's other sections of the brain which do other things, and the frontal lobe is the main intake of information coming at you. So I thought, well, and then I realized that when I was a kid growing up in the bush, not being able to speak and couldn't go to school, and but I read a lot and I wrote a lot, and to my absolute amazement, I also learned to speak by talking to my horse. There's nobody else to talk to out there. So I talked to my horse, Queenie. How you doing this morning, Queenie? I'd have real conversations. I say, do you think we're going to have a good day? Is it going to be fun? We're going to chase them brumbies again? What are we going to do? We're going to go flat gallop through the timber? Yeah, I like that. Do you like it? What do you think of that, Queenie? Should we do that? Yeah. Well, Queenie turned out to be quite a horse. She couldn't do. She a friend who was trying to a neighborhood friend who was trying to um, rear racehorses was unsuccessful at rearing racehorses, and he used Queenie as a pony horse to pull his racehorses along, but she wasn't fast enough. Um, she just couldn't keep up with his racehorses. So in a fit one day, he threw this horse at me and says, "Colin, get rid of this horse. If you don't take this horse, I'm going to shoot it right now. I'm tired of this horse. It doesn't do anything. It's not fast enough." Well, I said, "Yeah, I'll take that horse." And about then, my dad decides that I really shouldn't be here because I'm a major disruption. I'm getting in trouble with the local sheriff, and I'm not going to school. And I learned to fight, and so I boxed up a few kids who boxed me up, and so it wasn't good. Wasn't good for me to be there. So out in the bush, it all came together very nicely. Um, Took off all my clothes, covered myself all in mud except for a loincloth, and my face and everything, my hair, covered all in mud. And so I blended in. I could just walk up to any animal I wanted to eat, like a wallaby or small kangaroo or a lizard or a goanna or something, and they wouldn't run away because I looked like an animal too. And I was good with a spear. I'd learned to throw spears with Aboriginal kids when I was a kid. So I so I just would spear anything I wanted and throw it in the coals and cover it with palm leaves and cook it. And I owned the world. I certainly owned that lagoon. And so I started writing and doing things and reading and read Jack London. And it was pretty easy to become a writer for me, anyhow. I read Jack London and just copied him. I thought, well, if he's very successful, so I'll just write how he writes. So I'd copy all his sentences down, and then I'd make my own story and use his style and his way of putting the words together, and that worked out very well. Uh, but I thought, well, now years and years later, Linda's going to another world, and I'm thinking I should write about this. I should write about how our brains work. So I invented a story about a girl I called Emma. This happens to be the name for my granddaughter, and I put her in a place in Malibu in these hills here, with which I'm familiar. I live in Malibu, California, and it was Emma was reared on this ranch in the place that I live. I describe my place as her place, and then she became. She's autistic, so she can't talk with other people very well, but she can talk with the horse. I put her because her brain was on the same wavelength as the brain of the horse. So happens the brain of the horse is uh, is about the same size as our reptilian brain. Um, it's highly functioning, uh, but in a very primitive way. So Emma, in my story, she can only talk with the horse, but she can talk with the horse and knows what the horse is thinking. And I started to do the same thing with myself with my own horses. Started to started to train myself and think, well, I want that horse. I'd be riding the horse along, and I'd say, I want the horse to go to the left. And if you're on a horse and you're going along, and you look to the left like that without moving your body at all, just turn your head, look to the left. That horse is going that way. Every time, if you look to the left like that without giving any body cues, look to the left. In a few steps, that horse will also look to the left. Now, he can't see you because his eyes are forward. And you haven't said anything. All you've done is look to the left. And try it. Now, if he looks to the left too, then that means you've communicated to him in brain to brain. And you can do it by looking to the right too. Make an exercise out of it. You're just riding along. And I like to talk with horses. I always say, yes, there's a nice rock over there. Isn't that a beautiful rock? Now, he can't understand the words beautiful rock, but he can understand my tone. So he can read a lot into that. He can say, oh, look at that rock. He can read that tone and go, oh, he's observing something. So if I'm in touch with him, he's going to look at that rock. And you can do that all day long. And it's amazing. So now when you start performing with the horse, if you can visualize where you're going to go on a course, maybe it's a jump course or a barrel racing course or some tricky course, if you can visualize where the horse is going to go and put it in your head first and put it in the horse's head, just open the windows of your brain, so to speak, or your mind, so that the horse will pick up this vibe from you. And people do it with dogs all the time and with cats too. And but they're smaller animals and they live with us. Unfortunately, the horse can't live in your living room. Although I did take my horse in the living room one time, and Linda wasn't too happy about that. But however, so the the idea is to communicate with actual thought and imagine what it is you want the horse to do and concentrate on it. And you have to concentrate. It's a bit like learning Russian or Chinese or something else. You might only get a few words down at the start, but if you keep working at it, you'll end up with whole sentences, and then you'll end up with whole many sentences in another language. Well, the horse is its own language, and it's very much to do with our tone, how we sound. They read what it is. I can say, "Oh, what a great day! Oh, what a nice horse." Well, that sounds different to bad horse. Hate that. That sounds different to that, doesn't it? So he's going to pick up that. So uh, communicating with horses, it's an old thing. It's been around for many, many years. The Romans and the Egyptians were first to pioneer it, really. They were very good at talking with horses. Um, and so were the Sarmatian women warriors, 400 BC. They conquered all of the southern steppes of Russia with their ability to ride horses and communicate with them. Um, and they came up with the first saddle, a rough-looking saddle, but Attila the Hun in the year for 300 AD, he grabbed that saddle and made his own saddle out of it. And with that saddle, he captured the whole Roman Empire, or stopped them from invading him, and they turned around and they couldn't handle Attila because they were riding bareback, which is the worst way to ride a horse because all your weight's under a small section of the spine. A saddle distributes the pressure, downward pressure of a weighted rider over a bigger area. So that's how, but the Romans, that's how the Romans rode, but they also talked with their horses too. And they were advised to talk only in calm terms with horses unless it was a disciplinary action, then it was quick bursts of sharp anger. That was it. And that's how they were taught. And when I've read all the books on Attila the Hun, and that's basically what he used too. So there's nothing new about the behavior with the horses. It's a very old thing. But what modern people don't realize is that the horse is very much in tune with us, much more than we are in tune with them. We're still trying to figure out how they think, but and but they're looking at us and they know how we think. They can read us like a book, as I said, all the time, and we can't necessarily read them, but you can if you try. So in my book, Talking with Horses, I have my main girl Amber. She's autistic, so she can talk with her horse Tower, named after a great horse I had called Tower, and so she could get the horse to do complicated jumps by just asking him and visualizing how the horse was going to jump. But meanwhile, in my story, modern medicine is trying to cure her of autism, so they're putting her on all kind of drugs, which diminishes her communication with the horse because in the therapy world and the drug world, they're trying to shut down the reptilian brain and make the frontal lobes work more so that she could talk better and communicate better one-on-one with people. Um, but it didn't really work, and it doesn't really work. people who are autistic, um, they don't have the articulation that we have because they're not using that part of the brain, but they're certainly using other parts of the brain. So autistic people tend to be brilliant and smart in many other ways. Many Einstein, if you look at his behavior, he was certainly had the symptoms of somebody who would be autistic today, but he just concentrated just on one thing, and that was clear thought. And when you think about it, clear thought is an original thought is difficult to come by because a lot of the what we repeat and know is what we have learned from other people by reading, by being exposed to education, by being exposed to other people who share our knowledge. Uh, the vast amount of what we know is we have learned from somebody else. Original thought is original. That's something that's generated from your core, from your spirit. That's rare. However, once again, it can be cultivated. So, with talking with horses, Emma has I explore the idea of Attila the Hun. Not the idea. I explore Attila the Hun as a phenomenon of that time, and Emma, in her fantasies, like all autistic people, she has a fantasy world and a real world. In a real world, she lives in this place, much like my place, and they're trying to cure her of this autism, which is not going too well. Now, in that real world, she also falls in love or she also strikes up a great friendship with with a young man about her age called Jules, and he's also a renegade type person, wanted by the police, etc., etc. I modelled him after myself when I was that age. And so they have a relationship going. But that's in the real world. Now, in her fantasy world, she rides with Attila the Hun. And that's how, by having her and by exploring her fantasy world, I can then talk about Attila the Hun and the whole extraordinary world of the Huns and uh, how they fought, how they just annihilated any enemy with ruthless tactics, raid a village, kill the women and children, enslave the young men and make them warriors, or kill them if they were not good at fighting or wouldn't fight or something. So um, so she has Emma's riding with now the Huns, and she falls in love with a lieutenant of the Attila, a man called Zihan. So in my story, as it goes on, Emma now has a love triangle. She's got Jules in the hills of Malibu, and they spend time together riding in these hills, and they go to a waterfall up here in the hills, and all of these places I have ridden to and detail them. So that's a real world, and um, Jules is his name, and the police are after Jules all the time for one reason or another, and the parents are trying to get Emma away from Jules, but meanwhile, Emma's very much in love with Zihan and her fantasy. And for autistic people, the fantasy world is as real as the real world. One of their problems is the worlds are indistinguishable one from the other. So they go one from the other. And so this creates quite a triangle, especially with modern medicine. They're trying to um, get her to use other parts of her brain by shutting down the parts she is using, which causes trauma. But meanwhile, she's talking with Tower, and she becomes a national show jumping champion. And that's the story. And then in a fantasy, At the end of the story, she finally Zihan Xian in her fantasy meets Jules in her fantasy, and the two warrior men in her life battle it out, and that's book one. I have book two in writing now, and book two is centered on the Sarmatian women warriors, 3 to 400 BC, and they controlled all the steppes of Russia at that time, and were ferocious women, ferocious. They captured the enemy they captured. They would kill them and castrate them and dry their testicles and make earrings out of them. So they were really really feared. You wouldn't want to get captured by them. So that's book two, and they ran their operations. Very little has been written about the Sarmatian women warriors, but I've researched what is written, and they ran their tribes like you'd run a dairy farm today. They would capture one stud from one male warrior who was magnificent from the people they were fighting, and they'd bring him back to their tribe and instill him as a breeding stock, and he would then be mated with various other women in the clan, and they'd have a breeding program going, and that way they could only breed they'd only breed the very very best, just like we would on a cattle property, where you have a magnificent stud bull, and you mate that bull with other heifers to produce good lineage, and that's what the Sarmatian women warriors did. Um, and any of the males, the males that were born were promptly killed, and only the females were kept, and they were trained to kill at a very early age, and they were killers, pathological killers, but very good at how they killed. And they were the first ones to use the lances and to really use the horse as a weapon of war. Um, everybody else was on foot, except for the Romans. But they were not. They didn't have very good equipment one way or the other. They just had. They were good with their short swords, but the short swords were no match for the lances that the Sarmatian women warriors had. Imagine forming up with your short sword, and you got 1,000 men being and bearing down on that 1,000. You have 4,000 crazy women on horses gallop at you with lances. Well, you know who's going to win that war. And they they were brutal, and they just every first of all they used fear to attack everybody. Everybody feared them, and they were very cruel with what they did with their captives. And word spread, and they made sure that the word spread, because they'd leave their captives half dead all over the place, and castrated and everything else, and everybody feared this Sarmatian women warriors. Don't get hold of them. And so that's book two. Book three, which I've also mapped out, is the rise of God as we know it, as we know God. There are many many gods out there. Uh, I personally believe that God exists, and God's in each and every one of us. No matter where you are from in the world, you have your God. And your God is different from other gods, sure, but they're gods nonetheless. A God is a belief. And without a belief, you are nobody. You need to believe in something. So religion has always played a great role, I think, in civilization, and it gives people something to believe in. Um, I was brought up a Catholic, which I thought was, I never could understand that religion, especially as I was educated by nuns who inflicted such physical pain on everybody, especially me, because I couldn't speak right. So they'd cane me with special canes that they kept wrapped in wrapped in moist rags so that they'd have a lot of switch in them. They were cruel, and they did that in the name of God, their God, and the God I was supposed to believe in too. And I thought, nah, I don't think God wants me to suffer this pain. I think He wants me to look at the beautiful sky and the beautiful earth He's created, and the beautiful flowers and the beautiful animals. That's what I should be. That's what I should be embracing, not this pain. So, um, so I learned to speak by talking to my horse, because the horse didn't question me and certainly didn't laugh at me. I would say, "Hello, Queenie. How are you doing this morning? Are we going to have fun today? What are we going to do? We're going to go and chase those brumbies, those wild horses. We were tracking them yesterday, so I had a long conversation with Queenie. Well, how are you feeling today, Queenie? You feeling okay? I know you had an eyes on that Brumby stallion the last time we saw that mob. Well, guess what? You're mine. You're not his. So stick around." And one day I realized this is pretty incredible. I can speak. I'm not stammering. I'm not disjointed. I'm saying, "Queenie, how are you? It's a beautiful day, isn't it? Oh, we're going to look for the Brumbies." And it was so wonderful. Then I started writing, of course, and writing with a pencil and paper I had, and started using the language. And from that start, I would become a very successful writer, eventually becoming the most syndicated columnist in America, and at one time the highest earning journalist in the English language in America for a short time. So it all came from really talking to the horse. Without talking to the horse, I would never have been able to uh, approach people and kings and queens and leaders of state, etc., and feel very confident that I could speak well. And I didn't learn elocution. I just read books, but very simple books. So I write very simply, which I think is the most powerful way to write. If you start using tricky sentences and um, all kind of different construction and stuff, it takes away from the language. The English language is best used in its simplest form. Um, I'm familiar with probably 500 words in the English language. Well, there are probably 10,000 words in the English language. So I only know a short amount of them, or a short number of them, I should say, to be correct in speech. It's not an amount when you're dealing with numbers, it's numbers. Um, but you don't need to have a lot. You don't need to know every single word to be able to write. You just need to have passion for the words that you do use and put them together. And when I'm writing something, as I wrote this book, um, I acted like a reporter. I'd envisage the scene of Emma telling Tower to do the jumps, and then I would just report it. Emma's approaching the jumps now with Tower. She projects an image of Tower doing the jump. Tower then does the jump. That's pretty simple because I've seen it in my mind. I'm not inventing this. It's in my mind. I'm just reporting it. And so she meets Jules, and they fall in love as young people, as only young people can do, and that really burning passion of love, the first love. There's no love ever like that ever again in our lives because it's so heavy and so dramatic, and so but that's exploring the world of autism was great because it showed that autistic people they're really just like other people, only they're a little more, they're using a different part of the brain which causes them to behave differently, but the behavior is just a little bit unusual because not everybody is autistic, although interestingly autism is autism is on the rise, and we don't know why that is. Lots of thoughts are that it's to do with our diet, it's to do with our bringing up of children today. Um, don't know what it is. It could be anything. Um, could be a lot of things. I think it's. I think you're born with it. I think when you're born, there's a template. Boom. That's it. That's Colin. Colin's going to have all of these experiences, and this is what's going to happen in the end. And on next birthday, I'll be 82 years old, and I think it's a wonderful and extraordinary that I've lived this long, but most of all that I've endured a lot. But it's even the endurance part of it has been a joy, and it's all been joyous. I think life is like a a log floating down a river, a small log floating down a river. Goes along and it's very calm, and then the rapids come. And the log tumbles and turns and goes down, and then it resumes its course. But it keeps going. No log going down a river has ever turned around and come back that way. Never happened. Keeps going, may eddy here and go in a circular motion there for a while, and then it puts out, goes down, and goes on again. It's calm, until it hits more rapids. Well, that's life. My thought in life is we are all in the stream of life. And like all streams, you can touch the water in the stream. You can touch a bit of water in a stream one time. You'll never touch that piece of water ever again. You can go down there and you can poke around and say, I wonder if I hit that, slap that water there, if I slap the same water back up there 50 yards. I wonder if that's the same water. You don't know. You'll only touch the water one time, and that's life. You'll never repeat the day that just left you. You're floating down the river. You're going down the river. And coming up, there'll be waterfalls, there'll be turbulence, but there'll be nice and eddies too. You'll go out and there'll be a beautiful beach and beautiful background and fish playing on the surface, and it'll be perfect. You'll see lilies and all sorts of things there, and it'll be pleasing to the mind, pleasing to the soul. That's life. And then, as I experienced with my beautiful wife Linda, death will come. Death is inevitable. We are born to die. And why we say death is such a terrible thing, I don't know, because everything dies. I'm a gardener. I plant flowers, and there are beautiful flowers, but I enjoy them and look at them while they are beautiful. 2 weeks later, I go back and they're limp, they're going away, they're checking out, and so are we all check out. But it's a beautiful life, and we are so fortunate to be on such a paradise that is Earth. I'm Colin Dangard, and thanks for being with me today on my book, Talking with Horses. There it is. That's somebody, one of my tenants here, jumping in the cold pool. I love it. Thanks. We've talked about how the horse is reading you. Now, how do you read the horse? That's the tricky part, but not so tricky. The horse has several clear movements that reveal how he feels. A horse uneasy will not stand with his feet calm. He'll move his feet a little bit as if he's about to flee, but he's moving his feet a little bit. That's one sign. Another sign is, how is his tail? A horse at ease, the tail hangs straight down. Maybe it moves a little bit. If there's a fly there, it'll flick it away, flick the fly away. But a horse that's anxious, the tail will rotate. That's one thing. Now, if the horse is looking back at you, that means he's concerned for some reason or other. He's looking at you. What's going to happen now? Well, what you should do at that point is rub his forehead right there. That's the part of the horse that the horse can't reach himself. Right there, right in the middle of the forehead. Rub it, circle it. And then you hear him go, gives that nice little out noise. That means the horse he's happy with you. And if he's happy with you, open the windows, look at him, look at his feet, look at his tail, look at his eye. And if you're rubbing him there, the eye will start to get heavy. He's relaxing. Horses give very clear evidence about how they feel and how they feel about you. All you have to do is read it. Oh, I like this. Okay. So you've just changed their whole attitude. You've taken their attitude from one of suspicion and caution to one of, oh, this is good. You're not bad after all. I quite like being around you. Could you do that again? Oh, one other thing. Thank you to all of my followers. Tell your friends to listen to this crazy Australian who's as crazy as a March hare, but I've been around, so I know something. Thanks for being with me on the Colin Dangard Show. I'm looking forward to seeing you next week. Stay tuned and tell your friends. Thanks, mate.